problems breathing. After seeing the enormity of the situation, my spouse hurried me to the ER. I was terrified because I could feel my breathing getting harder as we headed to the hospital. My legs stopped moving and my lungs felt out of air. In this scenario, my spouse immediately sought medical help. A nurse quickly found a wheelchair for me after viewing my circumstance. I got into the wheelchair and was rushed to the ER by the nurse. My chest felt heavy in my memories. I felt like no amount of deep breathing was getting me oxygen. I was taken to bed upon admission, and the doctors swiftly assessed and treated my illnesses. My breathing troubles were treated with oxygen before a battery of tests. Many medical specialists awarded me a 4. I felt my body weaken and chill as my pulse rate rose unevenly. My world dimmed and my vision distorted. I lay in bed, frozen by anxiety. I felt like an unseen power was pulling me up suddenly. My spirit was leaving my body. I was sucked in and lost control. It felt like floating through space alone in the pitch-black sky. All was calm and beautiful in this weird setting. Bathing in the soft light made me feel cozy. My pain and anxiety vanished. I felt a mysterious power watching over me and telling me I wasn't alone. I suddenly entered a stone-walled room with an eerie old aura. This room resembled a medieval castle's great hall. The room's center had a long wooden table with 3 striking white plates, one on each side and one at the end. Fine silverware and wine glasses decorated the table. 2 large bowls of exotic plants I had never seen before were in the middle of the table. Their brightly colored leaves have interesting patterns. Their species was unknown, but their delightful scent endured. I was confused and didn't know what to do. One person was in the room. Jesus appeared unexpectedly, shocking me. A white gown and gilded cross adorned him. I saw his beard and hair. Jesus appeared determined with a slight wave in his hair and a neat beard. His kind, sympathetic stare seemed to read my mind and soul. He smiled at me like a father greeting their child. I felt unequaled calm and calmness in his company. I asked, "What is this place? Why am I here?" Jesus smiled and said, "This is heaven, the home of your soul." In confusion, I asked, "Am I already dead?" He said, "No, you are not dead. Your body is fighting against disease. Only your soul has come here." After reassuring me, Jesus invited me to sit with him. I was nervous because I didn't know what was happening or what Jesus would say. He calmed me by gently patting my hand with his warm, solid palm. I felt Jesus' kindness and compassion when I met his eyes. I forgot all my worries and sufferings in his company. He added that Jesus would give me a gift. A door was indicated by his finger. The heavy, worn wooden door looked centuries old. As the door opened, my father gently left. Dad died of a heart attack in 1988. My jaw dropped when I saw him. He exuded purity with a white robe and clean feet. His soothing smile took me back to childhood. As he embraced me, I felt his love and warmth. I was comforted by his promise that he was washing me. "Would you like to sample the cuisine here?" Jesus inquired with a smile, and I nodded silently. After that, Jesus filled a cup with pure water. The water in the glass smelled clean as I inhaled. Drinking the water cleansed and nourished me. I recognized the plate plant as new after closer study. It has stunning dark green leaves that appeared new. When I tasted it, it was delicious. It tasted sweet and smelled mild. It tasted fruitier. This supper satisfied me. My dad and I also discussed a childhood topic. Due to his love of fishing, my dad and I fished often. At 6, my dad went me fishing on the beach. I was intrigued by everything. A crab caught my hand as I reached for a huge shell. My father grabbed some shears from the fishing tackle box and told me to cover my hand as I cried. Dad reassured me things would be okay despite my fear. He cut the crab's claws to free me. Looking back, that was hilarious. After that, my dad asked if I wanted to view his new residence. After my nod, my father drove me to a lush area full of flowers and trees. Joy filled my heart like a huge burden had been removed. Our next stop was a lavish residence. It appeared to have been built using cutting-edge technology and expensive materials. It was my first time seeing such a magnificent structure. He informed me my dad lives here. The palace had countless rooms and passageways, all beautifully furnished to create a warm feeling. His room was full of personal touches when I entered. Several of his favorite paintings and photos were on display, along with trinkets and mementos. Wood furniture was carefully designed. My parents' portrait was on the wall. The bed was comfy, and the room had a library of cultural and historical books. I could tell my dad loved this property by how clean and pleasant it was. The balcony showed many angels circling the garden and square below. Singing and laughing brought joy and excitement. I couldn't believe heaven was that beautiful. My father informed me there is love and peace, no suffering or anxiety. Everyone can find happiness here. Once my dad and I sat on the balcony. He promised to stay with me in spirit after he died. He would be there if I closed my eyes and felt powerless. His words reassured me and made me feel like I could always count on him. My spirit suddenly shook. I was ready to leave my dad. I turned and hugged him. He rubbed my shoulder as I gently released him. I promised to keep his love and wisdom forever. My dad nodded and smiled with love. Regaining consciousness left me bewildered. A strange mask enveloped my face, and a needle protruded from my body. I was uneasy about these unusual objects. My kidneys and lungs were failing, so my loved ones informed me I might not have made it to the hospital. Hearing this news shocked me, yet I felt lucky and grateful. My husband remained silent after I told him. When the doctor visited me in the hospital, I had to tell him my story. My husband wasn't on board. He threatened to commit me to a mental institution if I kept talking about it. I felt disappointed and frustrated after hearing these comments. I was frustrated because I believed everything, and now people were treating it as a mental illness. Though I knew he was frightened, his words made me feel powerless. Since then, my life has been peaceful. My constant anxiety and concern seem to have faded. I instantly experience inner peace and tranquility for the first time. Since that experience, my nicotine urges have decreased, so I no longer smoke. Totally unusual. What a great change. I doubt I would have quit smoking without it. Now that I realize life is short, I refuse to waste it on pointless things. Because I know how important this feeling is, I try to be calm and focused. I've developed and strengthened from this experience, which changed my life. Now when I go to church, I'm excited to study the Bible. I share my tale with Christians. This interaction deepened my compassion for the needy. Hopefully, my story can comfort and inspire them. I believe this is God's will for me. I feel God's love and presence because of this. I want more people to experience God's love because it's amazing. A train hit my maternal grandfather in the head during World War II. His doctors still blamed this injury for his brain tumor 60 years later. He began radiation because the brain tumor could not be surgically removed. My grandpa always fixed something in the workshop or shed. With 2 more granddaughters, he had 7 grandchildren, including me. As a woman, I didn't like working with big machinery, so my grandfather and I didn't spend much time together and never grew close. His loved ones were everything to him. His radiation therapy appointments stressed our family. Other family members, including my grandma, worked all day and never drove. Since my kids spent most of the day in school, I stayed home to watch them. I volunteered to drive him to and from doctor's appointments. These trips improved our relationship. In the car, he made fun of me. This persisted for months. Radiation didn't decrease the brain tumor, we discovered. Although more drastic experimental therapies were discussed, my grandpa had enough. Hospice was his decision, but he declined. He needed emergency department visits even in hospice's early phases to stabilize and be comfortable. My aunt suggested a hospice center instead of hospice at home care during one of these trips because the care was exhausting. My cousin and I declined and offered to alternate caring for him. This may have caused my involvement in his death. My aunt and another aunt at my uncle's residence cared for him most of the time. Even though I lived 30 minutes away, I saw her regularly for weeks. His condition showed all the hospice nurses warned about. Therefore, his death was imminent. Choosing to stay the night. To stay that night, I contacted my husband to arrange our kids. The majority of the family returned home. I observed the full moon and a single cloud from the front porch as I said goodbye to my mom. I stood there curious, yet an inner voice urged me to go home for the night. I argued with the voice to stay. I went home as instructed. I informed my aunt I was heading home after changing my mind. I was embraced goodbye by a confused woman. It was late when I decided to go. I showered and got ready for bed when I came home. I was exhausted after a hard day. Zipped off to sleep. I was instantly back at my aunt and uncle's house, standing on the front porch, my mind racing as I watched the night sky's lone cloud. My grandfather stood beside me. His presence was felt even if I couldn't see him. Together with my grandfather's guide, I felt like we were being drawn into a tunnel. Though light, he appeared manly. I saw the whole room, including my grandfather and myself, from above. While following the guide, my grandfather and I suddenly found ourselves moving at a light speed. The tunnel was long and twisted, and we drove fast. Imagine riding a fast, twisting roller coaster. Tunnel covered a long distance. I kept expecting to arrive at every turn, but we continued going. I wondered, are we there yet? As I glanced at the tunnel's walls. The stars looked like streaks and the universe seemed huge. It matched Star Wars' speed of light in every manner. I was familiar with what I was watching, so it seemed natural. I didn't feel like I belonged or had died. I thought it was normal, but I wondered what would happen. After what seemed like an eternity, we stopped. I knew I couldn't follow them after leaving the tube. My height limits me from climbing this peak. I could feel the hallway ahead relaxing, even though I couldn't see a door. I could feel the tunnel closing in on my grandpa and his guide after they were through. I suddenly realized how cold and alone I was. I didn't notice my grandpa's guide's comforting radiance until it was gone. A call brought me back to life. When I woke up to a buzzing sound, I grabbed the phone. My mother called to tell me my grandfather had died. Despite not knowing its source, I claimed to know because I had always had premonition in my dreams and waking life. I had no notion that was a shared death. A few months later, on a Sunday morning, the same voice told me to make dinner and deliver it to my parents' house. I tried to reason with the voice again, but it insisted that I make supper and bring it to my parents' house with my family. I confirmed with my mom. I took dinner and cake to my folks' house per instructions. Everyone enjoyed dinner and visiting. We left around 9:00 p.m. We returned home and put the kids to bed. A call came in at 2:00 a.m. that my stepdad's chest pain sent him to the ER. To visit my mom, aunt, and uncle, I went to the hospital. Even though the cardiac hospital was in a small town, the ambulance brought him about an hour away. My stepdad was conscious and talking when the ambulance took him. This strategy change obscured our understanding. My stepdad was in my head as we traveled to the heart hospital. I knew he died in transit. That concludes this amazing journey. Wendy's tale was charming. If you had fun, leave a remark and like. Interested in learning more about these experiences? Subscribe to the channel and enable notifications for new videos. A momentary near-death occurs. I felt this one was unique and you would like hearing about it. Standing at the mouth of a tunnel, I saw my parents slowly approaching. Light shined from all directions, and the tunnel appeared to be 8 feet wide. I watched them approach curiously and knew they were chasing me. They were not alone. I felt it. They appeared late 50s in blue summer clothes. As they approached me down the tube, they moved like air with their heads down. They smiled slightly. Absolute quiet. I was painless and unconscious of my body, yet my vision was acute. I was immediately taken to a medical room, handcuffed, gagged, and with tubes in my mouth. Looking around, I felt like I was on a spaceship. Tall, white-coated men whispered. My husband chatted with one of the guys. A tall man said, "We have to take her up now." I thought, I guess this is how you get to heaven. Then I calmed down and left. The tall man told my husband, "And you can go too." Suddenly, I was back in my hospital bed. I was alone at night with the shades drawn. Looking in either direction, I could see the next building across the courtyard. President Abraham Lincoln sat in a top hat at a window in one of the lit halls. I thought, that's crazy, and looked away. I saw Abby standing whenever I looked that way. Nurses entered my room. I asked if she could see Abby Lincoln through that glass. No, she could not. He stayed overnight. I felt like I was awake all night. My wife and son visited me in the morning. I told my life narrative. I had a heart attack on the operation table during spinal surgery and learned the news. After 3 rounds of CPR, I was resuscitated. I broke 4 ribs during surgery. On Sunday morning, my Friday procedure was arranged. I believe my spirit left my body briefly. The encounter was so real and strong that 33 months later, the mental images are still vivid. Who knows? Possible angel or spirit guidance from Abraham Lincoln. Thank you for watching this channel. Your likes and comments on my videos matter a lot. I'm grateful since this motivates me to make videos. I thank you and look forward to our next incredible near-death experience. This happened to me when I was 8 years old on a warm, tranquil day. The smell of sulfur overtook me as I passed an open sewage pond and hog finishing barn. I remember briefly losing consciousness as I fell. My horrific ordeal began on the lawn where I landed. 30 to 40 feet above the earth, I saw the scenery. A utility telephone pole several yards ahead helped me measure this height. After several days, I still couldn't figure out how I scaled the telephone pole from up there. Starting my descent toward Earth, I saw a black hole near the green grass below as I fell. The opening seemed insufficient as I stumbled toward it. As I approached the pit, I fell more. Not a solid surface might be hit. The plunge through the black hole into the tunnel was like breaching a curtain. As I descended into the tunnel, its darkness and immensity increased. Instead of heading toward a light, I stared at the tunnel's entrance. As I aged and rationalized, my innocence faded. I felt like I had died and reincarnated into a higher consciousness. I can't recall some tunnel downloads. I remember the environment, but not the knowledge I was hoping to gather, which makes my heart ache. The life I left felt like a game, what little I know. Some approaches to play the game were better than others. I thought, gosh, I wish I could do that life over. How can I forget that? I wonder how far I could get if I could remember to live life that way. I regretted not making more of an impact in my 8 years on Earth, but it was a carefree regret. The pace slowed, and I found myself in a room with large screens placed in a panoramic configuration. Beginning a brief biography. My sister and mom were my main sights, yet I was confused. Even though I knew the time, place, and circumstances, I felt like I was watching the scene from a different angle in the room. I felt déjà vu, but from a new perspective. This life evaluation was emotionally painful. I felt the impact of my reckless statements on my sister and mother, not physical pain. It looked like misery, remorse, envy, and regret were 1,000 times stronger. I felt my emotions rising. I couldn't handle the intensity of the feelings. This had to end poorly. Suddenly, those dreadful human sentiments vanished. Instantly, pain vanished. I was spit back into that pitch-black tube in an instant, like I was washed. I was in blissful freefall this time. I had never felt so relieved on Earth. I walked through a meadow after departing. I knew and loved it. This meadow was one of my favorites despite never seeing it anyplace else. However, I remembered walking these fields and feeling comparable chilly breezes. Homecoming was a drag. My destination was clear for the first time during this struggle. After 30 years, I still miss the meadow and its joy. I wish I could recall more of it. More importantly, I don't know where the field took me. A large hall greeted me. I knew I was in good company since my family and forefathers were lined up like basketball fans. I knew them all. Some appeared older and patriarchal or matriarchal. I chatted with several as I walked. Again, I don't remember anyone's names. Maybe it's because my 8 years on Earth were deathless. I remember 2 conversations with a recognizable woman. No, I haven't. Can I speak to him? I replied with amusement and uncertainty to her question. Have you spoken to him yet? God was a great light, yet I saw him to my right during this experience. He did not look human or like Jesus Christ. Why are you here, my child? It isn't your time. You still have work to do. I was surprised by heavenly message, but I was expelled before I could ask what it was. Yeah, I'm going back. I have work to do. I nodded with the others who knew returning would be hard, so we talked about something else. Unfortunately, my memories of the large hall and ancestor experience ceased there. I was taken to a smaller part of a larger building. The building was classical Greek with columns and white marble. A twin flame romance occurred here. I recall saying we would be apart for a long time after a long talk. I returned to my body, but she wouldn't for a while. I thought she would be younger than me, even though our earthly lives would differ. After saying goodbye, she knew I had to work. I wish I could remember more about her and this aspect of my NDE, but I can't. This person makes dating more interesting, but I don't know if we'll meet. When I meet someone younger than me, I giggle. Boom, there on the grass, I was myself again. My near-death experience ended. No one spotted me unconscious on the ground that day or came to find me. I woke up alone. I got up and walked 50 yards to our house, confused. I saw the telephone pole for the first time on my way back and pondered how I had gotten up there to see the ground below. I hid my near-death experience from my parents and friends. I didn't understand anything at 8. I didn't process what happened until my 30s. When memories flooded back, you remembered most. I was unfamiliar with NDE and had no preconceived assumptions about them. Many people who have had near-death experiences wish to stay or never return. I would lie on the grass where my near-death experience, NDE, happened for weeks when my parents were away. Close my eyes and return there if I could. Shortly after, I buried most of that event's recollections in my mind. I declined to enter a certain area of the property. I buried the memories deeper because I was afraid of them. I had vivid nightmares for weeks after my NDE while doing so. Some of these nightmares were real and terrible.